Welcome to Let's Talk Adoption, where we dive into every side of the adoption story, the heart, the hope, and sometimes the humor. I'm Kim King, and today's guest is someone whose career has touched hundreds, maybe thousands, of adoption journeys. For over 3 decades, she served families as an adoption attorney, and now she's an award-winning author and speaker, sharing the lessons she's learned about faith, family, and God's plan for adoption. I'm so thrilled to welcome Alice H. Murray, author of God Adopted Us First, Faith Lessons from an Adoption Attorney's Adventures. Alice, welcome to Let's Talk Adoption.
Thank you. I'm so honored to have been invited to appear. Sometimes attorneys aren't the most liked people, so I'm
Well,
different from other attorneys. Adoption attorneys are not sharks, I promise you.
totally. I mean, adoption attorneys are a very unique species, I will say. You are the ones that are ready to act at a moment's notice. There's so much heart in what you do. And if you're a successful adoption attorney, that means you have a knack for a bedside manner that helps people feel at ease.
Yes,
Because you don't get far as an adoption attorney if you don't have a good bedside manner. And that
that's
matters
right.
so much as you work directly with adoptive parents in their vulnerable and stressful moments and placing parents as well in their moments of vulnerability and sometimes even confusion. And you help bring clarity to what the next steps are and clarity and reality to it all under, where the Lord is leading you. And I'm sure there have been many scenarios where you prayed, Holy Spirit and Jesus, just you're driving here.
Yes, exactly. And you have to have a personal touch because it's not a business transaction. It's creating a family. So
Mhm.
you have to have a personal touch. And if you don't feel any emotions from doing that, you don't need to be doing adoption work because it is a very personal thing and you need to have an emotional connection with the people you work with.
I couldn't agree more. Families actually say that word when they feel taken aback, when they start to research adoption and look for the right people to partner with, that they don't want it to feel transactional. So,
Exactly,
um,
exactly.
now you worked as an adoption attorney for over 3 decades, and that's a lifetime of helping families grow. And can you explain a little bit more about the work that you've done?
Well, I concentrated on non-relative domestic. We did not handle international. That's a different species altogether.
Yeah.
But we did domestic, meaning in the United States, non-relative infant placements. So I was what the other attorney in my office called the stork. I would go to the hospital, take consents, usually at the hospital, get babies discharged and placed with the adoptive parent. So I did all types of adoption, not just the infant, but that was my first love and what I spent the most time on.
And that is such, I mean, I'm sure that there are a lot of prospective adoptive parents listening, and they often ask, how does this happen? Like, how does it go that a birth mom picks us? We get that. Obviously, we know we have to have a home study. We get that. But how does it happen that she gives birth and suddenly we have legal rights to the child? And when does this happen? And so for you to say, like, hey, I'm the one that would go to the hospital
Mhm.
and, advise people of their rights and guide them through the paperwork and get the necessary signatures, right, for baby to, in most cases, be discharged directly with the adoptive parents. That's such good insight to talk about because adoptive parents often have no idea how that's going to work, who's going to be there with us. What do we expect?
It's a fear factor and it's for everybody. It's for the prospective adoptive parents, it's for the birth parent. The hospital staff may not know what's going on.
Hmm.
And for me, I mean, so much, it's such a weight on your shoulders because you want this is so important to everybody involved. You want to make sure it's handled correctly, you address people's concerns and take care of it. So I think the more information you can give people in advance about what's going to happen and what to expect. I mean, things always, things will happen. But if
Yes.
you know the basics of what's going to happen, let me walk you through what would happen if you went to the hospital. What's the timing? When would I come? Can you contact me? Same thing with the adoptive parents. You'll have to wait this amount of time. This is what the hospital expects. So it's scary enough with the emotional part that mom may decide to parent. I mean, that's her legal right. So
Hmm.
they're scared about that. So they don't need to be scared about anything else or left uncertain. So to the extent I can for everybody, and that extends throughout the whole process, even when we finalize adoptions and adoptive parents have to go to court. I mean, going to court is scary. You're facing a judge. And I try to explain the judges love these hearings. They live for the days they can do these. I went into court one time and the judge says, "Oh, Alice, please come in. I need to handle adoption hearing after today." Because I could hear literally shouting going on in his chambers over it was probably a divorce case. I don't know. But we were sitting out in the waiting room waiting to see the judge for the adoption. So they love these. So it's not anything to be concerned about. So the more I can relieve that uncertainty and fear, the happier and smoother the process will go for everybody.
Right. And that you have so much experience, I'm sure, is something that's a comfort to everyone, that you've been doing this for so long. Um, and that your presence is so warm. You're like a hug, but a hug that knows
Well,
what
I
she's
am
doing.
I
Yes,
am
you
a
are like
hugger,
a
and
hug.
I hug it. I always ask permission, but I have never had somebody say, "No, don't hug me." And when
Mm,
you're going through something so personal that someone cares and understands how you feel, and it's a familiar presence for the birth mother that I've worked through during the pregnancy and the planning of the placement for the adoptive parents. They know I am there. I'm a familiar face. I'm there for them. They can count on me. I actually had one birth mother that came in and met with me to make her adoption plan. And she said, "Oh, Miss Alice, you're so nice to me. Would you please be the one to come to the hospital and do my paperwork?" I said, "Of course, I'm the one that's going to be there. It'll be a familiar face. You'll know it's me. I understand who you are and what your situation is, what your concerns are." But it was very warming to me to know that I was making a difference and I can make a very difficult situation just a little bit easier for somebody.
and this I was as you were saying that, I was wondering, like, what did you decide first? Be an attorney? Be an adoption attorney? Did you always plan to be an attorney? How did
No,
God's plan get you
yeah,
there?
God had his plans. I had mine. I grew up, and you know who won that one. I grew up wanting to be a writer. When I was a little girl, we had this big weeping willow tree out in my yard, and I'd go sit in the branch and I'd write stories. And when I grow up, I'm going to be a writer. And when I got to high school, I was the editor of the paper. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go into journalism. And I took a political science class and I thought, hey, I can combine my love of writing and my brain, accepting challenges and working out problems by going to law school. So the next step was, I'm going to be an attorney. I had no idea when I went to law school what I was going to do. I just, and once you're in it, you're like just one foot in front of the other and try to get through. When I got out, my husband was in the Air Force, and we were up in Ohio, and I got out and I worked for a large firm up there, and they had me doing business transactions and litigation. And I'm like, I do not like this. I hated going to work because with litigation, people would fight over every detail. It was headbutting all the time. Nobody was trying to work together. Now, with an adoption, the opposite. Everybody's trying to work together for a plan that everybody can live with. So I was practicing as an attorney. My husband got transferred to Florida, and I'm like, I got to find a job. So I was working part time for a firm. They did not do adoption, but one of the attorneys said, "Hey, let me take you to the bar luncheon and introduce you to some people." And the attorney I ended up practicing adoption law with for 35 years was there and came over to me and said, "I could use some help." And like I was, and I had never planned, but adoption, who would say no to that? I mean, it was kind of scary to go do that for the first time. But then I just fell in love with it because, you meet so many wonderful people. It's not just paperwork you're dealing with. There is a lot of paperwork, but the focus is on the people. And that's what I wanted to do. And God's got a sense of humor. I firmly believe that because when I took the bar exam for the state of Florida, I don't remember a single question on the exam except for the very first one, and it was an adoption question. Yes. So I'm
Wow.
like, see, God was trying to tell me, I've got plans for you.
What?
You need to
Okay,
know adoption.
for me, that's a cliffhanger. What was the question, or what was it
It was
asking about?
about, well, the bar exam, it's not like what's the answer, a
Yeah.
factual thing. They give you a scenario and say, how would you handle this? What are some of the issues? And it was a single parent who wanted to adopt an older child who had disability. They throw in everything. Single parent, disabled, older child, what are some of the issues? What can you do? So I wrote all about that. Yes, single parents can adopt, and there's some different concerns when it's an older child. If they're over 12 in Florida, that you need to get their consent as well because they're old enough to know, or have an opinion on what they want to do. So, but it was so funny because I didn't even, I took the exam, I passed, haha, and then I move on. And then it was like, then this gentleman comes up to me and says, I need some help and I do adoption. So it's like,
It
yes,
was a
God showed
divine
me exactly.
appointment that you needed to go to that mixer or that luncheon,
Yes, that luncheon. It was
and
exactly
that
what they
he
told me.
spotted you.
And yeah, well, they said, do we have guests today? And the
Okay.
attorney that had invited me said, yes, she's new in
Okay.
town. She's looking for
Yeah.
some work. She's doing a few
Right.
things part-time for us. And then Rob, we had myself and Rob Harrell. I was the girl attorney and he was the boy attorney. That's what we jokingly called ourselves. But it kind of
Yeah.
worked because
Yes.
sometimes in an adoption, sometimes the birth mothers just feel a little bit more comfortable talking to a woman, and sometimes when you're talking to a birth father, it's better when a man is talking to you rather
Man.
than some woman you don't
Yeah.
know is talking about the
Hmm.
sensitive thing. So yes,
That is
but
so smart. As I was saying before we started the show today, and we were just talking, people love hearing from adoption attorneys.
mhm,
You're not okay. I said before a unique species, right? An adoption attorney is super special, and we talked about that. But people love to hear your experiences. So maybe you can share, like, is there a specific adoption story that stands out that really stayed with you, a favorite moment?
yes, one of my very favorites was from when I first started out. So if you do adoptions for 35 years, obviously things change a lot over time. So when I first started out, there was a specific hospital over in Panama City, Florida, that would not let adoptive parents come up to the nursery to receive an adoptive placement. They said,
Mm.
okay, you're the attorney, whatever the court decides, you guys can do that outside the hospital. So they required me to come. I was the one that had to sign all the paperwork. I got to dress the baby and put the baby in the little baby
Oh.
carrier and carry the baby out of the hospital. But the parents, they've been praying for so long to get a baby, they just couldn't wait another minute to receive placement of their little daughter. So I said, okay. They said, what's near the hospital? Where can we meet you and get our baby? And
Oh.
I'm thinking, it was in a very commercial area. There were a lot of fast food places and stores and things like that. I'm like, I don't know. They said, well, what's the closest thing to the hospital? And I said, well, the closest thing I know of is Pizza Hut. So, yes, and it was
Oh.
lunchtime of all times when I walk out of the hospital with the babies. I take the baby, strap the baby in the, infant carrier in my car, drive, just right across the parking lot over the Pizza Hut. Place is packed, As soon as the adoptive parents saw me, they jumped out of their car and they started running to my car, and the mom's crying.
Oh.
And of course, Pizza Hut is packed. So all the people that are sitting at the windows are looking out like, what is going on out there? I mean, they got lunch and a show. They got their I looked out the window and thought, oh, please, Lord, don't let anybody call the police. Like I'm a baby somewhere or something showing up because I handed them the baby and they left with the baby. But I am still in touch with that family, and I am still in touch with that adoptee. She's early 30s now, and we are friends on Facebook. And whenever her birthday comes up, I always write a note, happy birthday, Pizza Hut baby.
Oh, that is super cute. And I mean, that how long ago was that?
It was over 30 years ago. Like I
Yeah, because
said,
I was
that
thinking
was one of the early ones.
people may not always remember that you used to be able to sit in Pizza Hut as a restaurant.
Yes,
It wasn't
exactly.
just a takeaway place. And
Yes, no,
yeah.
yeah, there were people in there at their tables with their pizzas looking out the window with me transferring a baby to these crying, running people that couldn't wait a second.
That is
I mean, it was just so touching to see that. I mean, if you could just see, the excitement and love on their faces, it's just that sticks with me. And the book that I wrote, I included that story in there, and that family even sent me a picture that they had from the parking lot where they're holding the baby in the carrier. So yeah.
Oh wow. That is so cute. I love that there's a picture. Of course there would be, right? Where
Yeah,
we try to get
you
those
want to
moments.
remember that.
And when you tell that story, I'm looking out of the window of Pizza Hut when I imagine how that goes because it was outside. You parked your cars
In the
and
parking lot.
the
Yeah,
family
yeah.
took off towards you and that
There
was
we were.
it. They received their child. And maybe some people might be a little surprised to hear that that's how it went, that it wasn't in some sort of like, sometimes people have an old-fashioned idea of how it's going to go. Like
Hmm.
if you imagine like a bridal suite, like a
Hmm.
where a bride gets ready, they kind of think
Yes,
the baby will then be brought in and the birth mother will be in a different room or gone already. And the agency person will come bringing this child to us. But in adoption, and this is another reason why you are such a unique person in the world of law, is that you have to fly by the seat of your pants and whatever works,
absolutely.
works. And if it's a parking lot at Pizza Hut right next to the hospital, what that means is that those parents couldn't wait to get that child in their arms. They weren't picky
Absolutely.
about how it happened or where it happened. They were like, let's not waste a single moment. What's the nearest place to you? We're in
That's right.
compliance with hospital policy. We're off hospital grounds. What's the first closest moment that we can
Yeah,
have our
they
child?
could they can and it's so funny that you say fly by the seat of your pants because
Yes.
I am such a to-do list, check things off, be prepared. And so I think God had a sense of humor to put me in a situation because you never know what's going to happen in an adoption. Baby can come early, baby can come late, somebody can just call from the hospital already. So I always joked and said, yeah, God wants me to fly by the seat of my pants. Unfortunately, I'm wearing a dress or a skirt at the office.
I really love that.
And that's another reason I wrote my book because people have such skewed, I would say, conceptions about adoption and what's going to happen. And one thing I can say after 35 years is there's no such thing as a cookie cutter adoption. No two cases are alike. And what you think may happen is probably not going to happen. There's not one specific way. And I think it helps people to understand we can't tell you that.
Mhm.
I had somebody, I was sitting in a hospital. Of course, this is much later in my career. I'm sitting in the hospital room where the hospital allowed the adoptive parents to be with the baby till the baby was discharged. And of course, they're eager to leave. And they look at me and said, well, when is the doctor going to be here? Could you call him and tell him to come on so we can leave? And I'm like, and it doesn't work like that. Like the doctor shows up when the doctor shows up, and we sit here and wait for him. I mean, I did not laugh. I was very, well, we
Of
just never
course.
know the doctor's schedule because of, emergencies or deliveries. Or I was very nice about it, but I'm just like, there's no agenda or itinerary in an adoption other than mom's going to have a baby. We wait X time to get a consent, and then after baby gets discharged, you get a baby. That's about all I can tell you. The fill in the blanks between those milestones. Who knows what's
Yeah.
going to happen?
How,
So.
when, where, those are all question marks until they happen. I love that they overestimated your authority over the doctor.
Oh, no.
They
He
had a
would
lot
laugh
of
if
faith in you.
yeah, I'm like, "I'm not going to the nurse." The nurse would laugh at me if I said it. In fact, there's another book in the story. It was an adoption attorney's work. This is one of the hardest things about it. You have to be on call 24/7, 365 days a year with 15 minutes notice, right? So I
Yeah.
have worked, Christmas Eve, New Year's, July, you name it. I can think of holidays I've spent at the hospital on baby business. And I had one where the baby was going to be released on Christmas Eve. So I go, we get the consents done. It was early in the morning. I'm thinking, oh, great, I can get back home in time to, do some things, go to the Christmas Eve service. And the doctor didn't show up. I mean, all the consents are done, but you can't take the baby till the doctor signs the discharge. And we waited and we waited. Now, this started at 9 o'clock. We're waiting. And about 3:30, quarter of four, I actually got to leave the hospital because the doctor was not on. His office was closed that day and he was out golfing or something and he was going to run by the hospital when it was convenient. So I literally sat on a hospital bed all day waiting for the doctor to come and sign the discharge order. So you just never know,
You
which
just
is
never
crazy for
know.
people that want to know.
It is crazy, and especially, the nature of every moment mattering, especially with the birth mom, as she may have thoughts and feelings and
Mhm.
hormones and emotions coming through like a whirlwind
Yes.
in those moments. And so birth moms typically like to see certainty. It's
Mhm.
done. In our experience, we know usually they really appreciate the opportunity to see the baby placed with
Mhm.
the exact family they chose, that she
Absolutely.
sees for herself. So delays in that are, inevitable, but,
Yes.
sometimes that does happen because not everyone understands the nature of the moment that they're in with you, the adoption attorney, the birth mom, and the adoptive parents and this child. They don't
And
always
that,
realize the gravity.
yeah. And and it's sad to say, since we were having Hurricane Melissa the week that we're talking to each other, but it's like a hurricane of emotions for everybody at the time of placement. It's the joy of receiving a baby, the fear that it won't go through, the grief of how we got to this place. Maybe there were miscarriages, and then the same thing for the mom. Did I make the right decision? Is my child going to be okay? Just all these things are just whirling around. So one thing I have found in my writing voice, and probably if you've listened to me, you can tell my voice is humor. And I use and adoption is totally serious. I don't want you to get me wrong, but sometimes to lighten the tension, just a quick quip or something will make things a bit better. I had one birth mother, and I'm at the hospital, and the birth father was there with her, and they were just, a bundle of nerves and emotions and whatever. And about halfway through, she looks at me and she says, I need a drink. And I said, well, there's some water over there. I can get you a glass of water. And she goes, no, I mean a drink. And I said, well, I could get you some water and we can pretend that it's white wine. And she laughed. And after it was over,
Oh,
she hugged me and said, thank you so much for that, because that helped me to get through. It released some of the tension and the emotions, and just that little spark of humor there just, gave me the strength to keep going. So, it's so emotional, but sometimes a little bit of tension,
you know,
be relieved.
absolutely. And because we're human,
Mhm.
you're human and you're really seeing her in her moment. And you're again, we're getting away from the way it sometimes can be, which is transactional. And these are the moments between those milestones where, being an adoption attorney is really a calling and a craft. You
Mhm.
it's a gift and it's a calling, right? To be able to be in the room in these moments where someone is relinquishing a child. And this is why we harp on this so much. Don't skimp out on who's going to do the legal work in your adoption. You
Mhm.
really need someone that specializes in the specific kind of adoption that you're experiencing, that you hope to achieve. Because if you're listening to Alice and she's sharing about these moments and this vulnerability and how you need to know and think on your toes and fly by the seat of your pants and be there if it's Christmas Eve and it's snowing and the hospital is an hour away and the roads are shut down, but you need to be there and you get 15 minutes notice. I don't know any other Uncle Harold probate law attorney that's going to really be able to do that, right? Like, don't skip out on who you're hiring for your legal services.
Right.
super important. And it really makes all the difference, not just in the success and the stability long term of your adoption, but also how it feels for you as adopted parents and for you as a birth mom to have a quality experienced caring adoption attorney.
Right.
And so I know we always get asked this that when we work in adoption, have you been personally touched by adoption yourself?
I have not adopted myself, but my sister suffered from endometriosis, so she was not biologically able to have a child. So she and my brother-in-law have adopted two children. One was domestic here from Florida. She lives in Georgia, but the child was born here in Florida. And then my niece was born in China, and they went to China and adopted
Wow.
Christina. So, yes, but
Oh.
it's funny, well, maybe not funny, but it was eye-opening for me because the domestic placement of my nephew, our office handled that. I didn't have anything to do with it. The birth mother chose them. She had no idea of the connection between me and my sister and brother-in-law. And it was scary because here I am. I mean, I've seen the adoption professional side, and yes, there's emotions all the time, but it was a different perspective and a different magnitude to see what the family, oh my gosh, what if this doesn't go right? My sister's going to be heartbroken. She's already been through so much. And what if it's something I didn't do or should have done or didn't do right? So that was scary for me. So believe me, I get it from the adoptive parent side, how scary it is. And I try and do everything I can when I'm dealing with the prospective adoptive parents to alleviate or prevent some concern that they have because I've been there. It was not nice. Thankfully, it worked out, but it's scary, and I understand it because I've been there. I wasn't the one adopting, but it was my sister to with whom I'm close, so I get it.
Mhm.
I
And
get
then
it.
being able to just see firsthand and experience the
Right?
love that you have for your
Oh yeah.
family members that came through adoption, that there's no biological tie.
No, and I truly could not love my niece and nephew any more than if my sister had physically given birth to them. And I've had adoptive parents that have confessed that to me. I had an adoptive father one time. He was a pastor, and he said, "You know, Alice," and this is after the placement. He said, "You know, I was a little bit concerned that maybe I couldn't love this baby like she was my biological child." He said, "But you know what? The birth mother was a heavy smoker. She tried to cut back, but the child went through the nicotine withdrawal. So she was, you know,
Tremors.
can't trimmer.
Hmm.
She can't settle
Hmm.
down, and it's hard for her to sleep." He said, "I spent so many hours each night in the rocking chair, just rocking her and trying to comfort her." And he says, I love her so much, and I can't believe I ever thought that. I couldn't love her more than if she was my biological child. So, yeah. But you hear cool things like that. But that's why the perceptions are important, what you think. Yes, that's normal to feel that. That's one reason I wrote the book. There are a lot of normal feelings, you know. People think that, but that's not necessarily what's going to happen.
Right. I think it's a logical thought and a logical thing to wonder because you haven't done this before. I
Right.
know parents confess sometimes we don't know if we can love the next child as much as we love the first because we can't imagine another love as great.
Hmm.
So they, whether biological or through adoption or one of each,
Yes, that's
these are
right.
normal things,
Right,
that
right.
we wonder. And it's good to talk about these, especially hearing us on the podcast now. It's normal, so it's okay. Don't be afraid of it. And God will provide those moments, like with that
Absolutely.
father in the, all hours of the night, sleep deprived and pouring into this child that God had placed in his arms that was so longed for and prayed for, and that he was able to invest of himself into that child in a way that wouldn't have been possible, most likely, if it was a biological child. He wouldn't have
Right.
had those moments, and God provided exactly what that baby needed and exactly what that father needed.
Absolutely.
And So let's talk a little bit more about your book, God Adopted Us First, Faith Lessons from an Adoption Attorney's Adventures. And I love that you said adventures because your name is Alice.
Adventures in Wonderland, yes. But everything was an adventure because there's no script for anything. So everything is an adventure. You're seeing new people, new situations. Um, so it was why I loved it. And the years that I was practicing, I'm retired now, 35 years wore me out. Um, but the years I went through it, I'm like, I wish I could share this with people. A, so that they'd have a correct perception of adoption, but B, because there's a lot of faith lessons here that you can learn. Like love. You can love people that don't look just like you. It's not impossible. So I wrote the book is 40 stories. Now, believe me, I have plenty more, but I wrote 40 of the stories. They are true. They respect everybody's privacy. There are no names or identifying. Now, the Pizza Hut people did send me a picture. I didn't put their name, but they offered the picture because they wanted people to see that. But it helps people to understand what the process is like and to say, look, God is teaching us some things through these adventures. I mean, he certainly taught me to rely on him because I certainly couldn't have handled a lot of these things on my own. And in fact, I've even seen some miraculous things. So one of the stories that I tell about is, um, and I can't explain this any other way than God. God, that's all I can say. But there was a couple that came to us and said, we feel God's telling us to adopt a 2-year-old. And I'm like, well, I understand that, but just so you know, the 99.9% of the placements we make are newborns from the hospital. I said, usually by the time the child is 2, mom's bonded and is not willingly placing a child, or there's relatives that can step up. But, we'll certainly keep you in mind. They said, well, is there anything we can do to increase our chances of receiving a placement? I said, well, and this will tell you, this will date the story. Sometimes we'll put an ad in a newspaper back when they used to have classified ads. Now you have to advertise through an attorney with a bar number, but you can say you're, interested in adopting this. I said, we haven't really had a lot of success with that, but it is a way. If you want to do it, you'd have to pay for the ad, but I'll gladly do it. So they did. I placed an ad, heard nothing. 2 years passes. Key 2 years, right? I get a call from a birth mother that says, I'm in a terrible place. I don't feel I have any other options. I know this is what's best for my child. I have a little 2-year-old boy. Can I place him for adoption? Do you even have anybody that would take a 2-year-old? And I'm, of course, think of these people. I'm like, why, yes. So I got all her information. She's wanting to go forward. I call them. Oh, yes. So they were matched. They said, yes, we want to do it. So I start doing all the legal paperwork. So I'm getting goosebumps as I tell the story. I pull out the file, and in the file is where I had arranged for the ad to have been placed, right? So I looked at the date of the ad. The date of the ad was the exact date of that child's birthday.
Oh, wow.
So it's like
I have chills.
they had prayed for a child to be placed with them, and God had said yes, but it's all in God's time. So it was 2 years later they got exactly what they had prayed for. So that's encouraging to me because we have this fast food mentality. We ask for it, we want it by the time we drive around to the window. But God doesn't work like that. But I just sat there with my jaw dropped, looking at that day. I mean, I'm like looking, yes, yes, yes.
Wow, what a
That was
moment.
the
What an
exact
incredible.
day. So
When
not
okay,
everything is miraculous, but it does
no.
but it does teach you things. So, even if people are not people of faith, no, I am, but
Mhm.
you can read a story just to see about adoption and learn things about adoption. But following each story, I have a little devotion that talks about a faith lesson and then some questions. I call it baby steps to growing faith. So, but
I love
you
that.
springboard off the story. So yeah, so like I said, there were some amazing things that happened to me. I can't explain it any other way, but God's hand was on it.
As a person that always loved writing and journalism, in those moments, were you writing in your head how this would go, or did that come later?
Well, I always wanted, you keep the stories in your
Yes,
mind, and then it came to be I should write these down. And
yes.
then I kind of drafted something, but not in the form I have it now. But it was many years before God blessed me to be able to, be in a position to write it and get it published. So,
Mm.
I was thinking, but I really felt it on my heart. I really need to share this. I mean, how amazing and comforting and faith building to hear things like this. Why would I keep that to myself? I
Which
don't think.
which is why I think it's such a great time of year that your book is now available, that people can gift this to anyone touched by adoption or those who may be considering adoption and might need some comfort. Maybe you can't
Yeah.
have Alice walk in the room and give you a big hug, but she can share 35 years of moments that she encountered where God had a hand on the lives of these people, that he was intertwining their stories and weaving this beautiful, as we say, tapestry,
Mhm.
of what he had called them to, and the story that he had for this child, and how the timing of their lives intersected. And you share all of that in your book. And I love that you give those devotions too, because sometimes people need to be reminded of God's promises and get that encouragement. Then they may not always have someone in their lives that they can, and you are a wellspring of that. And I love that this book is coming out at such a time when people can opt to give that. And of course, maybe you can share real quick, we're not done yet, but where can they get the book?
Book it was published by Iron String Media, which is a Christian publisher, and it is available on Amazon. God adopted us first. You should be able to find it up on that. If you can't remember that, Alice Murray, you can Google and Amazon, and it'll bring
Yes,
that up. And I absolutely love the cover.
me
Iron
too.
Stream did a beautiful job. First of all, I practiced in Florida right along the coast. There's a beautiful picture of the coastline, and there's a woman holding a baby. Originally, the cover had the lady with long brown hair, and I said, since it's my story, can we possibly make the lady have short red hair? And they did. And then I came up the adoption symbol with the heart and the triangle. Everybody may be
Yes,
familiar with that. And then I had them put the cross at the top. So
yes,
I
it's
just love
perfect.
that. Love
Just so
that.
much symbolism in it. And I think people will be so happy to see that, if someone gifts it to them or you order it in the mail.
And I've been selling, and that's what a lot of people either they're adopted or have adopted themselves, or they say, I know somebody and they would really love to read these stories. So a lot of people are buying them as gifts for people who have been touched if they have not.
Absolutely. I love that. And that it's a compilation of stories. So it's not like one long novel you have
No,
to
no, no.
read through for hours and hours. You can sit, bite-sized. Say
Right.
you're on a flight or it's on your nightstand or something, or your husband's watching something boring on TV. You could read that instead.
Or you could watch it in the car line.
Yes, in the car
If you
line,
sit
the
there
pickup
for
lines.
15 minutes, you could read, and I don't call them chapters, I call them adventures. So we have
Yes.
adventures 1 through 40. So you could read a whole adventure while you're sitting in the car line if you had
I love
to.
that. And I just can see how God created you so uniquely for the work that you've done. And now this book, it's like everything in your life that he gave you. He sprinkled in, she wants to be a writer. He sprinkled in, she's warm and comforting. And he sprinkled in, she has a brain that's able to learn and is curious and retain. And then he put all of that together and that created you and the
Yeah.
work that you're doing, and how it's going to be, this book is going to be touching so many people in their moments that, they need that encouragement, and to read success stories of other people too. And even if, let's say, a birth mom is reading the book, that she's not alone, that many women have walked this path before her.
And I do want to say one thing. The reality of adoption is not everything works out. So I
Yeah.
don't want people to think it's all warm and fuzzy. There are some stories in there where something didn't work out, but there may have been a reason behind it and a faith lesson. So I do have some where, it might sound heartbreaking, but when you look behind it, there was a faith lesson
Yes,
to it.
absolutely. And I think that's reality, that no parent should ever be blindsided by the fact that a birth mom has the right to parent her child. And she has a certain amount of time depending on the state laws in the adoption and the
Hmm.
dynamics of the adoption, the age of the child. If it was a newborn or an older child, she has a specific time frame. And those are the kinds of things that your adoption attorney will let you know in those moments. Once the match is set, you know what state you're in, what state she's in, and everything. So
Yes.
unique
Yeah.
to everyone, and adoption law is always changing
Right.
rapidly.
Right.
Yeah. So, what is the connection between faith and adoption from your perspective? Because only God can do these things, right?
Well, I think human adoption is a reflection of the adoption, I believe, as a in faith. I mean, Romans says that we're adopted into sonship. So we're all members of God's family. We may be different genders, different races, different live in different countries, but if we're believers, we're all one family. And so I think human adoption mirrors what God has set up for God's family. And it's not a stigma. It's not a stigma to be adopted. It's, wonderful. More people love you. It mirrors what God does with his family. So I think that's great. And I think adoption can do four things for people. I mean, faith can benefit four ways from adoption. If you're adopting, first of all, you need to know it's biblical. I've had people that say, oh, it's unbiblical. You're giving your child away. No, God had a plan. So um, it's not unbiblical. Also, it may be a motivation. We're supposed to love one another. And pure faith is caring for widows and orphans. So, you need to help others in need. So that's a place where there's certainly people in need. I think faith is definitely going to, God will help you through anything. It's not just adoption. I mean, you're always going to have crises or difficulties in your life. So you need to look for Him, look for guidance from Him as you're going through it. So it can help us in so many different ways. And then once the adoption is over, that doesn't mean the case is over, but an adoptive family goes on, and there are still issues to deal with in adoption. And your faith can help you with that, because again, there's no stigma. People, some adoptees might feel I'm less than because I'm adopted, and that's not true. Right?
Mhm.
You're very loved. Just because you may not look just like your parent, or you know it's still wonderful. It's still wonderful. It's a faith thing, and we all
Absolutely.
love each other.
I encourage families to, when they say, well, how am I going to help my child, get through the fact that he or she was adopted? And especially like there can be complicated reasons why a child becomes
Mhm.
adopted, or, interracial adoption. How can I answer if they say, why don't I look like you? Or they go into school and the kids tease them because their parents don't have matching race with them. And I just tell them the first thing you need to focus on is developing their identity in Christ at
Yes.
home first and foremost, because when you have that, you're unshakable. As
Right.
they say, as we say, and as it is important to say, you have to remember who you are and whose you are. And whenever I remember that, it sets me straight and shakes that spirit of fear off. Who you are
And
and whose you are.
absolutely. And people, you shouldn't shy away from telling a child they are adopted. It's
Hmm.
not a negative thing or something you have to keep a secret. Talk about it openly.
Yeah.
We were blessed, to have you come join our family. We wanted you to be a part. It's a positive.
Hmm.
Um, Funny story, we had a secretary, legal secretary in our office. She and her husband adopted a child. And when the child got to be school age, they got a call from the principal. The principal says, I don't know the name. Little Johnny's in trouble. Oh no, what did he do? And he's going around, he thinks he's better than everybody else. He's going around telling everybody, my parents chose me to be in their family. Your parents had to have you. So he thought he was better than everybody else. But he understood, families are created in different ways. It's like God's family is created in a different way. You don't have to look alike or whatever, but it's not bad. It's a positive.
That
But
is
I just
too
thought
cute.
that was so funny, because most of the time you think people are scared to mention they're an adoptee, or they might be bullied or thought of as less than. And he's like, no, I'm better than you are. I
That's
imagine.
really cute. I remember a long time ago, we were interviewing an adoptive mom, and she had a few children in the backseat of her car as they were going to something. And only one child in the car was not adopted and started to feel left out because everyone
No.
else had a tummy mommy. So
Oh,
cute. It's so sweet.
yeah.
Yeah, so agree. From the very first moment, you should be practicing sharing your child's adoption story with him or her with positive adoption language and age appropriate details as those years go by. So there's never a moment of discovery. And we talk about that on other
Mhm,
episodes of Let's Talk Adoption so that, of course, hopefully we're normalizing that best practice because most times adoptive parents coming into this, birth moms coming into this, it's their first time. So it's our
mhm.
responsibility to give them that education and that notion that they can choose to share from birth or as
Mhm.
early as they can. And that I think lifts a burden from so many parents' shoulders, knowing that, hey, that's a thing you can do.
And I haven't written any, but I know that because my sister used some, there are good children's books on adoption.
Yes.
I know my sister had one, and I don't know the name or who wrote it, about the little bird that was in the forest, and something happened to the mama bird and one of the other little forest families. I don't know if it was deer or whoever, but the bird did not look like, but they were a family. So it
Mm,
gives kids the idea as families, you don't have to look alike. So there's great resources out there. It's not anything to be afraid of. And it's better for the child to have an understanding than to learn something later on. And then their world is shaken because something was
right.
kept from them.
And speaking of, things that people kind of discover as they enter into the world of adoption, what do you think is the biggest misconception that people have about adoption or even about adoption attorneys?
Well, about adoption attorneys, two things I can say about adoption attorneys. Number one, people think they're all rich. All attorneys are rich. And believe me, if you want to get rich, you do not go into doing adoption work, okay? Do personal injury or something like that.
Amen.
But not adoption. I mean, I drive a used car. I don't live on the beach. I don't take zillions of vacations overseas. No, so we're not rich. Most attorneys, I'm not, you can't ever make a blanket statement, but of the adoption attorneys I know, the vast majority are in this because they have a heart for people. They care, they want to make a difference. It's not about chasing the money, it's about, looking to the future, and children are our future. So they want to get into that. And help as much as they can. The other thing is, I've been told I'm a baby seller. Yes. So, and I'm like, no, I have never offered somebody money. I don't go out seeking birth mothers. They all contact me for help. And I tell them, you're the mom. You're the only one in your shoes that knows what your situation is. You're the only one that can make that decision. I can't, it's up to you. If you say, no, I don't want to do this, I respect that. That's your right. If you say, yes, this is best, then I will help you to the best of my ability to make sure that happens as smoothly as possible. But we are not, there's bad apples in every profession. Okay. I
Right.
haven't met a dishonest car salesman, but I'm sure there's some out there. But that those two are the biggest, that we're not rich, and we are not baby sellers. That's
Yeah.
not what we're doing.
Yeah,
It's
I love that
illegal to do
you're
that, at least in Florida.
that you're able to say that here on the podcast. And that goes back to your identity in Christ. You know that God had you on a course to come into these rooms and these moments in these people's lives. And the work that he was able to do through you, he needed you and chose you to do that work.
That's right.
So
The the other thing about adoption, um, people just have such misconceptions, and I feel because it's directed towards the birth mother. So we talked about adoption attorneys, but people have a bad attitude that all birth mothers are just abandoning or giving up their children, and that is the furthest thing from the truth. I tell birth mothers, you are doing what a mother does. You are doing something hard. Moms have to do hard things sometimes. You don't want your child to burn their hand. So if they put their hand on something hot, you tell them no, they do it again, you smack their hand because that's what's best for them in the long run. And that's what you're doing. If you decide I'm not in a position for whatever reason to parent, you are making an affirmative plan to make sure your child is okay. That is the furthest thing from abandonment that there could be. You're not
Hmm.
just giving up and throwing the child away. You're taking affirmative action to make sure that child has a good life. So
And
that riles me when people say that.
absolutely. And that's another reason why your book is so important because you're sharing adventures and you're sharing encouragement, but also every story that you share is wrapped in love. The love of a birth mother who chose adoption, and without her choice and her heart for that child, that page would be blank. It started with her.
That's right.
So now you've retired from practice. I'm going to use air quotes retired because you are the least retired person I've ever met. You're still doing so
Oh,
much,
there's
but
still not enough hours in my day. Trust me.
so, and you're obviously, adoption will always be indelibly marked on your heart. So what does it look like now for you? How are you still staying involved in adoption? And, what does it look like now?
Well, for many years, I have served on the board of directors for the Florida Adoption Council, so I'm still very active with that. We just had a conference September, and I presented a program on ethics and adoption there. So I'm very involved with that. And of course, the Florida Adoption Council is, keeping an eye on laws related to adoption so people can get advice from people that are in the trenches doing it, not a legislature who has no idea what's happening. So I'm involved with the Florida Adoption Council. I write articles and pieces on adoption. Um, it's still very much in my heart. I pro bono people. And there's not a lot of attorneys that know about adoption, so they may call me if they have somebody that needs assistance or have questions about adoption. So I'm involved that way. But I think the biggest impact is this book because I think
Hmm.
it's going to reach way beyond, just Florida for Florida Adoption Council or, one specific magazine I wrote an article for. But I think the book is going to have a more widespread impact and hopefully put adoption in a very, very positive light.
Are there things in the book that you put in there that maybe can help change someone's perspective on adoption?
Well, I just hope that they see, well, many things. I hope that there's
Yes.
so many. Well, let me choose one. Um, Again, I think one of the most difficult things I hear is when I say people think it's unbiblical for people to adopt because somebody's had to give up or abandon or whatever. And I try to put in the introduction that, there's accounts of adoption in the Bible. This is something that's gone on for years. This is not something modern society is just, we're throwaway society and we've just decided to do this. I mean, Moses was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. Uh, Queen Esther was raised by her cousin. She was an orphan, and her cousin Mordecai raised her like he was his father. And even Jesus, Joseph was
Mhm.
his earthly father, maybe stepfather, if you
Step
put it
parent
that
adoption
way.
in the Bible.
So it's not unbiblical, and God used all those people through their, adoptive situations. It wasn't he abandoned them or something was wrong. He had a bigger plan. I'm not saying, he makes people go through a bad time just for that. But God's got his hand in whatever's going on, and just it's not unbiblical. I mean, just read the Bible. It's right there. It's now adoption is not an option for everybody. It's not the right answer in every case. But if a parent truly believes that's what's best for a child, I saying that it's unbiblical is just it's not helping. It's just heaping guilt on somebody that's already in a difficult position.
Yes, and you have poured so much of your heart and humor into, and I think that is just the best yin and yang. It's the best like mix because as you shared, earlier in our talk that adoption can be heavy. These moments can be so heavy, and a little bit of humor can help ease the tension. And your writing voice has a lot of humor, right? I mean,
Yes.
if your writing voice is anything like your speaking voice, which I'm enjoying so much, by the way, Alice. And
Thank you.
how does humor play a role in adoption stories or even in your faith journey?
Well, Jesus, I think, laughed. People don't think that, but he wept. So he had human emotions, and he laughed. And I can just picture him walking along with the 12 disciples, and I'm sure they were kidding each other, or kidding around. But you can't always focus on the negative. My mom would always tell me, accentuate the positive, and it may be a negative situation, but focus on the positive. And sometimes when you lighten the tension a little with humor, you're more able to focus on the positive that's coming out of it, because you go into that circular, deep, dark hole. The more you focus on the negative, the worse it seems. I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes I've gone to bed at night and say, oh, this situation's impossible. I got someone get up the next morning, like, what was I worried about? But
Mhm.
you gotta lighten it. You gotta lighten it. So I think the humor is there, makes bad situations more tolerable, lightens the heavy, heavy, heavy emotional atmosphere that adoptions bring. So anything that makes it a little bit better, and life's just more fun. I don't think God wants us to
Yeah.
sit here and just be sourpusses. I think He wants us to enjoy life, and humor can help and make people feel better. So let's use it as a tool when it's appropriate.
Absolutely. And as you walk, every day with, in conversation with the Lord, you can't help but see the funny moments. What
Yeah.
you thought you were going to do, how
Yes.
you thought it was
Sure.
going to go,
Oh, so
your
that's what you think you're gonna do.
expectations.
Sure.
You can't help but see the
Yeah.
humor in it. And I think that's on purpose. I don't see God as someone that's stoic and 100%. He has so many facets to him, and humor is one of those. And we were made in his image, so
Right.
there we can find humor in things, even in the tough moments.
Right.
So, Alice, thank you so much for joining us today. Your stories, your faith, and your humor give us so much hope for us here at Let's Talk Adoption, but also to anyone touched by adoption. So, where can listeners connect with you and find your work? And of course, we're going to put all the links on the show page, so don't you worry. But maybe, and you're everywhere on the internet. You are a
I am.
busy bee.
Yes, I am. My humor does come out some I have a blog post. In fact, I put one out today. It's called Alice in Wondering Land. And Alice in Wondering Land is on WordPress. I talk about different current events with kind of a humorous view, but providing information, because I really feel teaching, getting information out. So I have that. I write a faith column on pathos.com. I write regularly for Go Christian Magazine, which you can find on the internet. It's a quarterly publication. Um, let's see, where else am I? Other place. I have books. I've been in. I pen a lot of devotions. 3 devotions a month for dynamic women in missions. I'm in guideposts, different compilations. If you go to the author page on Amazon, there's a list of books that my work has appeared in. So,
Mhm.
and you can always look me up online. I have a Facebook writer page, Alice H. Murray Writer. Um,
And your
and my
Instagram too.
I have Instagram, I have Pinterest, you name it. I have, you can find me. My email is author, as in right, author,
Uh-huh.
AUTHOR dot Alice H. Murray at gmail.com. So I encourage people, if you have stories about adoption, I would love to hear about them, or you have a question, I'm more than happy to communicate with people and share what I've learned or know.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Alice, for being with us. And again, the book is God Adopted Us First: Faith Lessons from an Adoption Attorney's Adventures. And what a treat to have Alice here with us for this episode of Let's Talk Adoption. You can contact Alice directly, and for future episode ideas, guest ideas, books that you've read that are meaningful for you on your adoption path or that you feel could touch anyone else, such as the book God Adopted Us First from Alice. Feel free to write to us on our contact page at letstalkadoption.com. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and we'll see you on the next episode of Let's Talk Adoption.